Interjections, episode 101. Welcome back, everyone. No such thing as a dull moment in the world of Inter. Inzaghi out, Chivu in. We're going to break it all down for you. I'm your host, Andrew. Mikko, Irfan, and Jay with me. Mikko, what's Finland up to in World Cup qualifiers these days?
Not much. To be honest, I didn't even follow the match yesterday. There was had a late evening yesterday. I had a partying the Inter signing Cristian Chivu as the new manager. So it went late. But what can you do?
All Mikko does is party. He doesn't actually work, so no surprises there. Irfan, what's going on?
Not a whole lot. Like you said, just reveling in all of this wonderful Inter news. The season's barely been done, and I feel like we have enough news to talk about for like the next month. So, Forza Inter.
Isn't that the truth? It feels like the Champions League loss to PSG was a lifetime ago. Meanwhile, it's been, 7, 8 days? Jay, I'll let you just take all your shots at the Italian national team now. Might as well get them out of the way.
Just like to point out that Italian sides are 8-0 on aggregate in the last two matches. I am, of course, talking about the last two Italian teams to play football, that is Inter and the national team, which is coincidentally populated by the same Inter losers who lost the first aforementioned game 5-0. So great time to be an Italian if you are. Great time to be a supporter of the Italian national football team if you are. And as always, it is a fantastic time to be an Inter supporter. The stock has never been higher by right now while it's about to hit rock bottom, but there's some ways to go to the depths of the recession just yet.
My only response is Spalletti out.
He might be out quite soon.
That's the hope, Mikko. That's the hope. This guy should have been canned after the disgraceful performance at the last Euro. Anyway, we'll save the Italian national team breakdown for a different episode. Maybe once they lose to Moldova. Let's get into. I want to separate this conversation into two parts. We're going to start by talking about Inzaghi's legacy at the club, and then the latter half of the episode we'll get into Chivu and Chivu's what that means for Inter. So the Inzaghi discussion is actually really interesting because, one, this is very polarizing. I've seen Inter fans across the internet come in with wildly different perspectives on his time at Inter. But also, I just view Inzaghi as the most difficult coach to define at Inter since I began watching this club because it's a bit of a paradox. You all know the final tally: 1 Scudetto in 4 years, 2 UCL finals, 2 round of 16 exits, and a bunch of trophies that we don't actually care about. So on the forum, every time a manager or a player leaves the club, we throw up a poll. And basically we're asking, okay, is this person an Inter legend? Is this person going to go down as someone famous in the lore of our club? Or are they just another former player or coach? So will they be lost to the passage of time? And the knee-jerk reaction from a lot of people is that Inzaghi will be lost to the passage of time. He's just another manager. And there's an approach you can take, a holier than approach, an altruistic approach maybe, where both Herrera and Mourinho are your only great Inter managers, everyone else isn't. But in the past, people have voted managers like Mancini into this elite category, and that's why there are just complexities and layers to this debate about Inzaghi, because on the surface, 1 Scudetto in 4 seasons feels like a massive disappointment, especially when you consider the nature of 2 of the losses, which were just proper bottle jobs. But it was a big one that he won. He won number 20. And if you look back at the modern history of this club, winning a Scudetto has not been an easy assignment. There's only been 6 Inter managers since in the last 50 years who have won a Scudetto: Barcellini, Trapattoni, Mancini, Mourinho, Conte, and now Inzaghi. And when you start factoring in success in European competitions, you can't deny that Inzaghi has a better resume than at least half those guys, including Mancini and Conte. And that's without getting into the financial constraints of things. No one on that list I just rattled off did more with less than Inzaghi. Suning invested a ton of money into the team for Conte. Mancini and Mourinho were both in charge when Moratti was still cutting it fast and loose financially with major signings. Meanwhile, Inzaghi, the day he got here, it felt like Hakimi was already gone. Lukaku basically asked to leave. And it's just been, we've bought so few impact players since Inzaghi joined the team. So I totally get the argument of not calling Inzaghi an all-time great, because he will always be the dude who lost a Champions League final 5-0. And the way to leave the club after the final to take a paycheck at one of the least prestigious positions of possible in football, it doesn't reflect well on him. But still, he exceeded all expectations for me as our manager. I expected nothing from this guy. I didn't think he'd ever win a Scudetto with us. He took us back to a degree of pedigree that we had when I first became a fan of this club. Although we might have just lost it all in a 5-0 final. We'll see. So for that reason, for me, that Inzaghi belongs in the special tier, the LGI tier. Mikko, I think you're in agreement with me on this one. Do you agree that Inzaghi's legacy will be looked back favorably as time passes?
Yes, I do. I think you broke it down pretty well, and it's hard to comment about this La Grande Inter or not. Does he belong there? But yeah, I think when the time passes, there will be like a less relevance on this on this kind of catastrophic Champions League final, and more about the kind of the whole Inzaghi era and what he did and kind of accomplished at Inter. Even like you said, it was a bit less than we might expected like afterwards. But as you said, I remember myself as well thinking when we signed him that okay, this guy is not going to win Scudetto for us, but he did. So that's one thing, and of course it's a hard one since there's so many kind of almost moments with him winning things. So yeah, but I would say that it will pass the disappointment, and he will be seen as a not a legend, but a very good coach for Inter in Inter history.
On the other side of this, Irfan, I know you feel very strongly the opposite way.
Yeah, I do. I think it would have been different. Look, I don't hold the 5-0 against him that much. I think in the grand scheme of things, it'll be remembered as, the most lopsided loss in the final and all that sort of thing. But like realistically, it doesn't matter really if you lose 3-0, 4-0, 5-0. Like I don't care about that too much. Try not to be too recency bias centric here, but the reality of the situation is that I think it's true that financially we were pretty burdened, but the Scudetto we lost to Milan and the Scudetto we just lost to Napoli, I think you'd be very hard pressed to argue that Inter didn't have a superior squad to both of those teams. And ultimately, it's about the players on the pitch and the manager who's calling the shots. And so, although the expectations were lowered when Suning got into financial trouble and Conte exited, and we lost Lukaku and Hakimi, we did reload to some extent. And I think we had a better squad than we showed. And for his tenure over 4 years to have only one Scudetto, to me, is a pretty damning indictment. I don't feel like, look, I credit him for success in Europe, but success in Europe, I think, is a bit of a fool's gold in that it's really, it depends on a lot of things, including a lot of luck. And whether you get out of the group stage or you make it to the quarters or you make it to the semis, I don't think it really matters that much in the grand scheme of things, unless you win the whole thing, right? So I'm not taking the 2 final appearances away from Inzaghi's record. I credit him for that, but I don't think that. Let me just say, like, it'd be very different if he had won one of those 2, or if he had won both of those. Then I don't think this is much of a debate at all, right? But given his track record in closing out important games, whether it's in the league or in the Champions League, we're filled with like regret on what could have happened. And even if you like don't hold that against him, I think it's absolutely unforgivable to do what he did, which is to leave for a joke of a league in Saudi Arabia in the prime of his career. Like, that decision in and of itself, I think, encompasses who he is. It encompasses his like entire reality as a manager. He's not bold. He takes the sure thing. Honestly, I don't even know if he believes really in himself. I can't imagine any elite or even semi-elite manager making the move that he just made in his supposed prime of his career. I mean, it's a total wimp sort of move. And it shows like a real lack of belief in himself. I mean, you're telling me that you couldn't take maybe slightly less money, but found a different job? I don't hold it against him that he left Inter. Mourinho left Inter, but Mourinho left for Real Madrid. This guy left us for Saudi? Like, seriously? And you're going to put him in the same kind of echelon as the Inter greats? Hard pass on that for me.
Do you think the first Champions League run, being against such easy opposition, strains the view of Inzaghi? Like, if he would have gone out in the first Champions League run, also beaten the Barca and Bayerns of the world, would people look back more favorably on him?
I don't know. Like I said, I think that might be part of it. But like I said, I think, look, he beat Milan in the semis. Like, had he lost that, I think we would have held that against him pretty highly. I think whether it's fair or not, Europe is it's a mixed bag. Like, I think it's a roll of the dice. I think it's hard to give someone a lot of credit for doing well in Europe, and I think it's really difficult to give someone a lot of blame. And that's why I'm trying not to let that influence my decision so much. I think this is based more on his performance in the league, and then also his performance in the clutch, in the way the club has performed in the clutch and against better teams. For example, we've talked exhaustively about how we fared against the better clubs in this year. So that, and then the way he exited, and I didn't even really get into it because I don't want to just trail away on this, but also just the way, in some cases, the way he manages the club, like it just shows such a lack of, like, he's just not like a bold sort of guy, right? Like, he has no courage, even on the pitch. Like, his substitutions and his consistent, running the same players out there into the ground, the way he did to Dzeko and to Mkhitaryan, and some of that, fine, you can blame on ownership and management, but he had a very I think negative tendency to play the same players over and over again without them earning the spot, to get them very comfortable, and then to make the substitutions that he consistently made all the time, to fall into the same traps that he used to fall into whenever we had even a slight lead, and then we give it up down the stretch late. He kept making the same mistakes over and over again. And so I'm trying not to let Europe heavily weigh into the equation on this. I think his league performance with one Scudetto in 4 years and essentially losing 2 that he should have won, I think is more damning than anything in Europe.
Jay, what do you think? Will Inzaghi be remembered as one of the great Inter managers 10, 20 years from now?
I think Interjections is the best. I think Interjections is the greatest Inter podcast currently out there on the market, and any Inter fan worth the salt, any intellectual Inter fan should be tuning in weekly to listen to Interjections. What was the question again?
I think you basically answered it perfectly, so we're all set there.
Something about Inzaghi. So I'll just give my general thoughts here. But I think there's a lot of truth in what everyone has said up to now, and maybe it's a sign that I'm finally maturing, but I don't feel that much anger or frustration or even disappointment, really, following Inzaghi's departure. But for me, his entire tenure will always be tinged with a bit of regret, because for me, he's the biggest what-if kind of manager that I've seen in my lifetime as an Inter fan. And there's other managers who have shown what they could do to the absolute extent. I'm thinking of Mourinho, obviously, and he achieved basically the greatest achievement that any manager could achieve, a treble, in a relatively short time, in 2 years, and then he left, right? So it doesn't leave much to the imagination. I mean, sure, you could sit there and think, what if he had stayed and, become Al Ferguson for 15, 20 years or whatever, but realistically, that's not Mourinho. That's never been Mourinho, so no point in wondering. Likewise, someone like Conte has been a proven flog in Europe for pretty much his entire career. Everyone knows that Conte's rigid 1 game per week drilling and just pulverizing of a league format is what gets him trophies. But at the upper echelon of the game, when you're playing against these fantasista type players, the Yamals and the Rafinhas and the prime Messis and whatnot, you come up short with your militaristic regimented 3-5-2. Inzaghi, though, on the other hand, he had the style to compete against these sides and always represent Inter the best on the continent, right? I think we haven't lost at home in like 16 Champions League games. And I think, obviously, making 2 Champions League finals in our history is something that doesn't happen very often. Inter's made it to 7 Champions League finals in nearly 130 years and 120 years, and 2 of them have come under the same guy in the last 4 years. So what does that say about that guy? I don't think, I do agree that there's a degree of luck involved, and we saw that especially in the first Champions League run, where we had Benfica and Porto and Milan, 3 pretty shit opponents, let's be real. That aside, this time around, we passed through a heavy gauntlet to get there, and regardless, look, even if you do get fortunate or softer draws, you still have to get through them. And the reality of the matter is, other Inter squads under other Inter coaches failed to do so. Like I said, we've made it to 7 Champions League finals in our entire 125-year existence, or a 20-year existence rather. And why are you telling me we never once got an easy run up until then? You telling me we never once got a soft path to the quarterfinals, round of 16, semifinals, whatever, in those 115 years? We have been given, decent opportunities, but we never had it in us to take them up until recently, it seems. And I attribute a lot of that to Inzaghi and the way he was able to prepare for the cup format of football, and just the way that his football translated to the continent. If anything, it probably translated better to the continent than it did at a local level. So I really can't take that away from Inzaghi. I have to give him a lot of flowers for that. And at the same time, what Irfan said is ultimately true as well. The fact that despite doing so good in so many areas, he habitually came up short at the absolute critical stage when it required just that extra bit of courage or ingenuity or drive to get over the line. He was full of doubt. He was full of fear in some instances and stubborn as hell in other instances, and ultimately it cost him. And I think ultimately you have to take the good with the bad and realize that this is just the way Inzaghi is. He is that kind of flawed genius, that kind of tragic Shakespearean hero in that regard. The guy who is capable of doing so many good things, and yet due to his flaws, maybe he doesn't achieve them as often as he should. And rather than get angry at it or get overly frustrated at it, I've just kind of accepted that is how he is and that is who he is. And at the same time, I do regret that maybe we didn't get enough time to see him develop those traits as much as I would have liked. You can't wait forever. And yeah, for all his talk of trophies, I remember his son put a post on Instagram and his wife put a post on Instagram, and they're all talking about the 6 trophies. And I'm like, fuck off. Like 4 of them are like Super Coppa and stuff like that. There's only 1 trophy, and that's really worth a shit. And as Irfan and yourself said, Andrew, yes, absolutely agree that we've bottled 2 Scudetti, and the last Champions League final in particular was an absolute disgrace. So those definitely leave a sour taste. But I'm still somewhat regretful about his whole tenure and what could have been had he been reinforced properly by the management, and also had he himself been a little bit braver or more experienced, or a bit more tactically adventurous at times. And I regret that we didn't get to see him reach his full potential either. So that's my 2 cents as it stands.
Yeah, I completely agree that it would have been nice to see Inzaghi with a proper mercato at some point, with proper investment in the squad. And depending on who you believe, part of the reason he's gone is because we weren't making him promises he wanted, promises he needed about the type of investment we were going to make this summer. Who knows if that would have actually swayed him from the large salary offer. Mikko, does Inzaghi leaving for Saudi Arabia dampen his legacy for you at all?
That's a good question, because last episode when we discussed right after the final, I think I was pretty certain, or I didn't believe that he would actually leave. I think the rumors were there already. They were relatively strong, but I still refuse to believe he would actually go and leave. But now, like a week later, I've been reading a lot of comments and kind of reports and whatnot, and I'm on the same page as Jay, that it doesn't really bother me that much that he left for Saudis, because I have a feeling that he was just like done at Inter, that he was too tired. He couldn't see himself pulling like another season, which like this the one which just ended. It seemed to be very taxing for the guy, and that's my kind of hunch or perception of the situation, that he just couldn't see him going through it again. Maybe the discussion with the management, there was the like you, Andrew, referred, that there would be some kind of guarantees or kind of he wanted this or that from the mercato. I think maybe that played a part there, but I feel that those things have been discussed like already during the spring, and maybe there was the feeling that Mercato won't be like any kind of a spending spree where he would get a lot of expensive players, obviously. So maybe that kind of sealed it in the end for him, that okay, he would have to like kind of start it over again, maybe a bit of additions to the squad, but still it's going to be hard, and he just didn't have the energy for that. That's how I feel why he left. And I don't know, that there's been talk that did he decided before or after the final. Well, we can't probably ever know that. Maybe he'll tell it later, some years later. Maratta said that he decided after the final, and he kind of took a few days to think about it, but who knows? Mm, yeah, I'm not like super disappointed about the Saudi exit. It was a surprise, but then it was like, okay, well, this happened now. What next? Kind of thing for me. I'm like pretty fast, kind of adapting to these changes, since it seems to be the way this goes now with Inter. So just gotta look to the future always, and yeah, I don't know. It would have been nice to see him, like Jay said, to get a bit more reinforcements, and kind of see more years from him if he would have been able to build like to this core, to the game style we have. But
yeah, imagine Inzaghi like hypothetically next season or the season after, and instead of Mkhitaryan, he's got like another $50 million midfielder alongside Calhanoglu and Barella. Imagine he's got some like a prime De Vrij, or like someone young and in their prime, instead of like a 37-year-old Acerbi. Imagine
like
he's got a team assembled with proper scouting and proper investment and proper development, rather than a team overachieving by a magnitude assembled from scraps and reject bits and pieces. That's what I wanted to see. That's what we'll never get, and that leaves me full of regrets.
Yeah, exactly. Like two proper forwards on the bench, so that you don't have to use Lautaro and Thuram like every match, because otherwise there's a massive risk you can't win the match. So yeah, that's the regret. But I'm now seeing it, this whole kind of our path out of the Panther era is that we had Spalletti, who got us to the Champions League. Conte won us the first Scudetto, which was super important to kind of get the understanding for the guys, like what it requires to win Bastonis, Barellas, Lautaros, and so on. And then Inzaghi, he elevated our game to the next level and was able to kind of bring us back to the map in terms of European football. But then,
guys, he's a coward. He is a coward. Look, you can't not hold the fact that he left to Saudi Arabia against him. You're talking about how he deserved more reinforcement in the squad. He deserved better investment. All of that's fine. But in the words of my 11-year-old son, womp womp. Like, get over it, right? It does not make sense for him to have that as his chief complaint, and then he moves to Saudi Arabia. That is a coward move. He didn't go to Liverpool, or he didn't go to some EPL team where he could have, hundreds of millions of dollars to spend. He didn't do any of that. He left to go to Saudi Arabia. That's what he thinks of himself. That's the kind of courage that he has. How could you not hold that against him? And the other thing I'll say is, Jay, you talk about this all the time. You can't let the the fantastic legacies of these clubs overrule what's actually on the pitch and what's their squad at the time. Juventus and Milan have been historically poor, as far as I'm concerned, over the last 4 years. They should not even be a real threat. And yet they've whomped us in the league how many times? Consistently, and Milan even stole a Scudetto from us. Like, how do you not hold that against Inzaghi? Regardless of his squad quality and depth, we've had a superior squad to Milan and Juventus by a large sum over his 4 years. And how many times has he delivered a result in the league with respect to those two clubs? And Napoli, I'm sorry, but this Napoli squad is pretty poor too. And you could say, because of the schedule and because of fighting on all these fronts, it costs us the league and blah, blah, blah. But ultimately, you still have to hold him accountable for it. You can't just give him a pass on those issues.
I absolutely hold him accountable for those things. I also just hold more factors accountable. I hold on more factors than Limona himself. I hold management accountable for prioritizing the finances over the on the pitch results, for gambling so heavily with we'll make do with fucking Arnautovic, rather than maybe we have to delay some repayments. Maybe we have to take a loss a little bit longer if we spend 20 million on a backup forward instead of a free agent in Taremi and a 35-year-old in Arnautovic. I blame the management for making those decisions. I blame the players, like especially Lautaro has been a target of mine for a long time. I blame a lot of players for not stepping up when it matters. And as much as I blame Inzaghi for those things, I don't think anyone can say that realistically the squad is not where it needs to be in some regards. Like, a lot of these players are non-factors. Klaassen, non-factor. Buchanan, non-factor. Palacios, non-factor. Martinez, non-factor. And the flip side of the coin is that, sure, Inzaghi probably greenlit a lot of these transfers too, but therein lies the rub. He's, as much as he is a yes man, he's able to create something far greater than the sum of its parts, in my opinion. I really don't think that pretty much any manager that I've seen in my time would have achieved as much as Inzaghi did with a 36-year-old Acerbi, a De Vrij who was coming off some really, really bad performances back in like the 2021, 22 kind of season. Darmian, we got to a Champions League final playing Darmian as starting right centre back because Skriniar was kind of, I don't know, he had some like long-term back issues / contract issues, and he didn't play pretty much that entire season. Of course, then there was the whole Mkhitaryan thing, and then we were playing like Alexis Sanchez as a deep line playmaker at times. There's this team started, other than the starting 11, has been propped up by a bunch of, like I said, overachieving components. Imagine like a car engine running on components that are picked up from a scrapyard and that are on the absolute last legs, but still the car ran and managed to win the race. We are all upset that we did not win some races, but when we look back and open up the hood and then realize that, oh yeah, actually, we didn't win the race and maybe we in fact blew a pretty big lead. But now that I open the hood, I remind myself that this engine had never been fully tuned up properly. This engine had always been assembled from, I'm about to reveal myself as a fraud here because I don't know engine parts, but I'm not really a mechanical car guy, but maybe the fucking the valves or the pistons were sourced from a different engine and they don't fit properly and they're all rusted. But what if we had like an engine that was properly assembled with all new parts, new shiny parts that were all actually operating at full potential? Then we could give a better account of the driver. And look, ultimately, no coach gets like their dream squad. I do concede that, but like I said, the gap between where our squad was, and again, I stress that our squad was very much like assembled by a combination of over the hill yet tactically intelligent players, just far overachieving, and the system of Inzaghi, which, like I said, greater than the sum of its parts, was able to extract much more value than these guys would traditionally be able to produce at their current physical state in their careers. Put two and two together, you have something that's far better than what it costs. But ultimately, the bottom fell out. And yeah, like I said, he's to blame. But how can you not want to see him given a proper car to drive rather than this fucking like Mad Max scrap heap?
Speaking of scrap heaps, let's talk about our managerial search that we just completed. This is not going to be a optimistic conversation from my end, the Chivu appointment, because this is a bottom of the barrel desperation hire that I didn't even think we were capable of, to be completely honest. We just hired a guy who's as close to a rookie manager as you can get. Chivu has managed 13 matches at the professional level, and he has 3 wins in those matches. And I said last week on the episode that our window was closed. I guess I didn't realize how closed it was. It was clear from the start of this search that Morata never actually thought Inzaghi was going to leave. If he had inkling Inzaghi was going to be gone, if he truly thought he was out the door, Morata loves experience. Morata loves known commodities, and he would have gone out and he would have tried to tie down Allegri. He would have done something to get a more definitive option in here, but that wasn't the case. Inzaghi left on Tuesday or whatever it was after the definitive meeting. And as you look around the league landscape, a lot of the big known commodities were already off the board. Allegri had gone to Milan. Conte had decided to stay at Napoli. And we were left with choices where none of the, let me frame it this way, none of the realistic choices that Morata would be willing to make were going to be exciting. Because we know Morata is going to hire somebody who's Italian. We know he's going to hire somebody with Serie A experience, or at least that's what we told ourselves heading into the search. And that left you with candidates like Palladino, possibly Mancini. There wasn't a ton of great options out there when you have a guy leading the search who frankly is not very creative when it comes to this stuff. And the bigger problem is that people have demands, and we've spent a lot of time talking about how much Inzaghi did with so little during his time here. And you have to admit, very few managers and pretty much no manager with leverage is willing to accept and work under these conditions where you're getting no Mercato guarantees. You really don't know what financial commitment Oaktree is willing to make to the club. And seemingly every possible personnel decision you make is tied to whether or not you can obtain Champions League football or not. It's just not a condition that elite managers want to work in. And that's why I laugh when I hear people talk about like Simeone or Klopp. Like, let's not be delusional. Let's not be Milan fans. These guys were never realistic choices for us. But when you get into, Fabregas, who may or may not have turned us down due to Mercato demands, and you see the list of names we were contemplating, it's just laughable. Like, this is not the situation you hire a guy with 13 matches of professional managerial experience into. Like, this is a team that was just in a Champions League final that, in theory, should be competing for a Scudetto next season. And instead, we're handing over the keys to a rookie manager. It just does not compute. This is a frustrating hire for me. You can find things in Chivu's profile to talk yourself into being optimistic. I'm sure Mikko will do so. He had good results against bigger clubs. He beat Juve and Atalanta. He drew us, as you probably remember, but still, there's a very real scenario where Chivu is sacked by December, and everything is on the table now. We're not guaranteed a top 4 finish. We're not even guaranteed European football, and it would not be shocking if the bottom fell out of this thing completely. If these players really start to show their age next season, they don't respond well to Chivu, and then all of a sudden we're back in the wilderness again. We're looking at another banter era. So I'm deeply concerned about this appointment. Irfan, how are you feeling about the Chivu era?
So I like Kivu personally. I liked him when he played for us. I think he has some real potential as a manager. I don't even think he's done that poorly when he took over his current role. But for all of the same reasons that I am currently really down on Inzaghi, I'm also down on this hiring. Like, I hate to use this expression consistently like I do, but it really comes down to the soft bigotry of low expectations for us Inter fans. Like, we've been beaten down so much that we don't think that we deserve or can get a quality manager. And when our manager, runs to Saudi Arabia with his tail between his legs, we try to come up with excuses about how he guided us to 1 Scudetto and 2 Champions League finals, one of which he got crushed in, and 2 leagues that he blew. So I don't feel like this signing is commensurate with what we should be expecting from this club. I don't think that Chivu is a hiring that a club of our stature and of where we are currently should be hiring. I think this hiring matches the ambitions of our owners, which I think is a very poor indictment on what they're doing right now. And it's really hard not to be absolutely pessimistic about the hire. And with that said, I actually like Kivu. I think he will do a decent job as manager. I don't think he's that bad tactically or otherwise. I think there's a big question mark on what he really is like because of how little, first team management experience he has. So I wish him nothing but the best. I think it's great that we have somebody who's passionate about the club, who's been with Inter for a long time, up and down the chain, even after he retired. So I think all of that's really good. But no, I mean, this is not the kind of hiring that a self-respecting club with ambition in Italy would make. They just wouldn't. And again, I agree with you. We don't have to be, we don't have to delude ourselves into thinking that we're going to get Simeone or Klopp. But I do think that we should have expected something better than this. And I know we didn't specifically ask about this or talk about this, but the way that the club kind of flamed out on getting Cesc Fabregas also is really weird to me, because all of the media narrative and noise about Como won't let us take him, that's bullshit. Like, did we let Inzaghi, did we let Saudi Arabia take Inzaghi? No. I mean, if a manager wants to go somewhere and the team is willing to meet the manager's demands, then we should get that manager. So you're really telling me that whatever Como and their ownership could do somehow blocked Cesc from coming to us? No. He probably got into that meeting. He probably had certain demands on the ownership giving him certain players or making certain investments, and then they just didn't do it. So again, it shows a complete lack of ambition by the club, and that's it's an indictment of everything. I mean, the last week and a half has all been a massive, massive indictment and failure of the ownership.
Mikko, I'm sure you'll be optimistic about this hiring somehow.
Well, I gotta say, I'm on the same page as Irfan. I'm always kind of optimistic in a sense that I look forward, but I also see kind of massive risks in these type of signings, like you guys said, like this is Inter. You can't just put a total rookie to lead this pack. Like that's like a massive risk. Like, what happens if the season doesn't start that well. The core guys are tired, and there's no proper preseason like last season for some of the guys, like the main guys, and it starts poorly, and the results won't come. What happens then? There's like a massive pressure from the media at that point. Like it's a bit interesting, like how did they end up to this situation? And it was Marotta himself who like directly admitted that Inzaghi leaving was a bit of a surprise, and I can't understand how that's possible for Marotta. Like, he's like a seasoned veteran in this business. He shouldn't be surprised about almost anything. Well, Lukaku pulled a fast one on him, but now Inzaghi as well. Like, how is this possible? He should have anticipated this. Like, there's a real chance Inzaghi might leave, and then he has a proper plan. Like, they pulled off the plan after Inzaghi left. Like, what? Like, you can't do this business like that. But on the same note, if we had hired Allegri, I feel that might have backfired as well. Of course, the risk is a lot smaller, and in terms of kind of expectations, it would have been like, okay, we definitely need to win Scudetto now, and so on. And that's not a bad thing, of course. But now with Chivu, the expectations kind of needs to be lower, and it helps Chivu, but at the same time, it kind of sucks for everybody that, okay, we don't even try to reach the Scudetto now. Like, what are we doing here? We have our core team here. They are like they want to win. Like, what is this whole combination now? Like, will there be confusion because of this kind of mismatch between the squad and maybe like a total rookie coach? Like, can he get their trust and so on? So there's like I'm a bit confused myself, and I don't have like a good kind of vision or kind of opinion, like what I would actually think about this situation, because there are like many angles on this. So all in all, I of course hope that Chivu will do well, and he will kind of he will just continue Inzaghi's work, like how we play. Hopefully bring something new to our play, because maybe we discussed this before. We usually haven't have like a proper plan B with Inzaghi. So maybe Chivu could find one. We retained our this what is the guy's name? Matteo Keki. I don't know how to pronounce that name, but this kind of technical director, or like he wasn't an assistant coach, but this kind of a tactical guy in Inzaghi's staff. He remained at Inter, and I feel that that's maybe part of the reason that we kind of get this kind of rookie guy. We continue with our way of playing, hopefully improving that. We improve the squad and go from there. But still, I feel this is like this is a big risk, but kind of interesting one, because I'm optimistic always. So I'm interested to see like what's going to happen with Chivu.
All right, Jay, you get to settle the tie here. How disastrous will the hiring of Chivu end up being?
You know, as we record this, Fabrizio Romano tweeted just 20 minutes ago that Spalletti is set to resign. So, Spalletti round 2, anyone? But Andrew, you got your wish. The national team is no longer managed by Luciano Spalletti. So
I can't
there's
wait
that.
until they rehire Mancini.
Yeah, I was about to say it's doesn't leave them with that many choices. Should Italy maybe even look for a foreign coach like Fonseca or Conceição? But we can discuss that another time. Look, Chivu is obviously a dipshit hire. There's no ifs and buts about it. I mean, they're all dipshit hires, let's be real. At least with Fabregas, there's this. I don't know how even real it is, forgive the pun. There's a fabricated illusion or impression there that he's young and trendy and tactically innovative. And I don't know how much of that comes from the way Como actually played versus just him as a player and him being young and somewhat of a novelty in this Italian game dominated by conservative managers. He's obviously foreign, yet he's invested in the league. He came to Serie B, I believe, to retire in Como, which is, there are worse places to spend your retirement years than Lake Como, of course. And then he became a coach, and I think like a part-time, like a shareholder of the club as well, if I'm not mistaken. So the whole thing about Fabregas is kind of interesting, right? So I don't know how much of his coaching credentials or the appeal of the idea of him as a coach is influenced by him as a package, as him as an idea or prospect. But at least he had that. Fucking Vieira, are you fucking kidding me? Chivu, like these guys, despite not being that much older than Fabregas themselves, nor having much less experience than him as a coach, these guys are mediocre enough that they don't even have that, like, a young and up and coming coach kind of thing. They're just young, but already proven to be nothing special kind of thing. And that's very unfair to say regarding Chivu because he's only had 13 games, but I think you get what I'm saying. The lack of hype about them at this early stage in their careers is, I think it's somewhat revealing. Obviously impossible to write them off totally, but I mean, just what are the chances of a rookie coach succeeding at Inter when he's barely had any first team managerial experience? Now, is there any like logical reason that Chivu cannot be our Guardiola? I mean, no. Sure, maybe he might be, but again, realistically, what are the chances of that happening? What are the chances of that happening at Inter, a club where there is no grassroots to first team path the way Pep took charge of the La Masia before becoming the first team coach? We don't have that. We don't have that top to bottom club DNA and club focus on homegrown talent, whether it's players or coaches. We don't have that. We, as everyone knows, we use our youth as bargaining chips for 3-4 million euros and nothing more. The youth team don't have anything to do with our first team. They don't even play the same formation as our first team, if I'm not mistaken. There is no intention of integrating the youth team with the first team at Inter. And so I can't imagine there's any intention of developing coaches either. And so the notion of Chivu is, let's be real, I think it's pretty farcical. And I want to harken back to conversations I had with esteemed members of this podcast, or even listener questions asking why I was negative or whatever it might be. But this is why, I say that at Inter, you can never relax even for a second, no matter how stable things appear to be, no matter how good things appear to be. At the drop of a hat, things can go from great to absolute, just unbelievably bad. It's been a week since the Champions League final, guys. 2 weeks ago, we were in contention for a league double and a Champions League. Fast forward 2 weeks, we were on the back end of the worst humiliation of all time in the Champions League. Our long-term, at least by Inter terms, our long-term coach and his established system and the reliability of that has departed the club, and we've replaced him with a rank amateur who no one can realistically expect anything good from. Again, just empirically, there's nothing like what he drew against us and Juventus. Like, okay, relegation. Like, I'm sure Davide Nicola has achieved similar relegation heroics before as well, but we don't really go for Davide Nicola, do we? So this is why the sword of Damocles hangs above Inter's head at any given moment. At the drop of a hat, things can go from great to Crisi Inter, and so as a harsh reminder to all of you Inter fans, don't say I didn't tell you.
I refuse to accept this Nicola slander. He is an elite manager as far as rescuing teams from the brink of relegation, and considering that's going to be our situation in about 6 months, we should have Nicola on our radar. All right, I think that's a solid episode right there. Good point to wrap everything up. We'll be back next week. We'll give you all Mercato deep dives. Perhaps we will preview the Club World Cup, although that might be hard considering none of us have ever seen our opponents play a football match before. We'll figure something out. Is there a Jay's hot betting tip?
Well, I bet on Norway beating Italy 5-0. They won 3-0. Who is Italy's next game against? Their next World Cup qualifier?
Moldova? Is that it? Yeah, that one.
Moldova, the small Eastern European nation bordering Romania, if I'm not mistaken. Let's give them a historic 1-0 win.
Any predictions for who Italy's next manager is?
Actually, that's a great one. I don't know, actually. I think, like Palladino or something? Like, there's not many Italian managers out there who are available worth any repute. I think Pioli is what's happening to Pioli again? Isn't he coming back to Serie A?
I believe he's still available. He's a Scudetto winner who has been to a Champions League semifinal.
Wasn't
I think
Pioli coming back to Fiorentina? Because Palladino left Fiorentina.
That's right.
Yes.
I thought Pioli was going back to Fiorentina. Look, in any instance, I don't have a clue. It's as much up in the wind as our own situation, I guess. So
maybe Patrick Vieira.
Chivu snubs Inter for Italy job.
Yeah, Chivu is not official yet.
How about? Wouldn't it be the best if they somehow managed to get Fabregas?
Thankfully, all these names you're throwing out there are not Italians, and there's 0% chance they hire a non-Italian.
Yeah,
that I agree with, actually. So I think it'll be Palladino just because he's the only guy available.
Is it Robbie Mancini? Robbie Mancini back.
Yeah. Whatever happened to Montella? Remember Montella? How about that guy?
In Turkey now?
Oh, is he? Okay, I could see that.
I think he might be managing the Turkish national team, to be exact.
Yeah. Oh, nice. Okay, there you go.
I will break something if they bring Mancini back. But I will say I've enjoyed Mancini just needling at Spalletti on Instagram like a 22-year-old girl all week. Fantastic theater.
What the fuck was that?
What?
Haven't you even seen this? Mancini has been liking comments and stuff on Instagram that are complaining about Spalletti, just kind of needling the guy and how poor of a job he's doing.
Fucking dickhead. These Italians, seriously.
I'm telling you, it's because Mancini probably has a 22-year-old girlfriend who he learned this all from. He's the type.
Is Mancini gay, according to Sarri?
What?
Yeah, that's fair. Remember when Sarri got suspended, Mikko, for calling Mancini a term I will not repeat on this child-friendly podcast?
Right.
I'll repeat it when we finish recording.
It's something to do with what Sarri likes to smoke. I'll leave it at that. All right. Well, we'll call it there. Italy sucks. Inter sucks. Everything is awesome. Mikko, take us away.
Forza Inter, Forza Chivu.
All right. Catch you all next week.
See ya.